Welcome to the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where we are apparently in a cold war with Ethan Sherwood Strauss. Did you know that, Ben? Did you hear we were in a war?
I missed the memo.
Yeah. I thought usually there was like some nukes that you would station in different places and some propaganda you'd get going, and I don't know. We missed all of the memo, but apparently we're there. I'm Brendon, Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing. That's Ben Axelrod, a senior editor at Awful Announcing. We're not going to be talking about our differences in views on Twitter and Blue Sky today with the most popular sports media newsletter writer around, but we are going to be talking about Around the Horn and its unceremonious end. Jake Fischer, newly of the Stein Line newsletter, longtime NBA insider, will join us later on. And we're debuting a brand new segment taking a peek at sports media fan bases, digging into the depths of what audiences are saying about our favorite sports media personalities. Let's get to our instant replay to kick things off, though, Ben. ESPN is going to be canceling Around the Horn in the summer of 2025. It had been kind of rumored. It is now closer to official. For whatever it is worth, I have confirmed the same news, not that it needed that. And it does sound like ESPN is expected to work with longtime producer of Around the Horn, as well as PTI and Highly Questionable and some other shows, on a new program in that classic 5 p.m. Eastern slot that Around the Horn has occupied for 22 years now. So I don't think anybody would look at this as a massive surprise in 2024. ESPN has evolved a ton, but what is the part of this that is sticking with you? What's the biggest takeaway from this news as we've had a while to chew on it now, and now it's official?
My personal experience with it is honestly, I'm surprised that Around the Horn lasted this long, and it's not because it's a bad show or even, like an annoying show. Like I know like people find First Take annoying and shows like that as irritants. And I don't think anyone views Around the Horn as that. Maybe it gets lumped in guilt by association, but this is a show that ESPN never felt like it was truly behind. It always kind of felt like the warm-up act for PTI. It was, I think, somewhat groundbreaking in that it came in with PTI and they kind of ushered in this embrace debate type of era that got taken to a whole nother level with First Take in the early 2010s. But this was a show that, it's going to, by the time it comes off the air, it's going to have been around for almost a quarter century, which is pretty incredible for any show, let alone one that I don't think anybody would ever say like it was one of ESPN's signature shows. It was never, it never got treated the way that Get Up or First Take or even PTI gets treated. But to survive in that 5 p.m. slot for as long as it did, and it did go through a few different iterations with Max Kellerman and then with Tony Reale, and then the way they kind of evolved from having traditional sports writers to more media personalities on the show. It did evolve, but ultimately, it never felt like a show that ESPN was truly behind. And so the fact that it's going to wind up having lasted for 23 years, I think is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I don't think it ever really it doesn't even feel like necessarily the people doing it always agreed on what it should be. Like I went back and looked, I wrote a little thing about the end of the show for Awful Announcing this week or late last week, and I went back and looked at the Those Guys Have All the Fun book that James Andrew Miller wrote about ESPN, and I just flipped to it's only like 5 pages where they even spend any time on the show. And it's like that debate thing that maybe we attach to it, everyone almost universally agrees that once Max Kellerman left and the show became less antagonistic and like conflict based and whatever, and I guess a little quieter, that it got better and everybody liked doing it more. And so obviously that change happened pretty early on, but the tone of the show, who's on the show, whether those people are inside ESPN or outside of ESPN, it hasn't really been one thing at all at any point. Maybe you would say like the last 7-8 years, it kind of settled into being a more recognizable thing. But it makes it hard to pin down. I just look at it and say that we have this whole conversation all the time about ESPN moving away from journalism. I don't think this is any sort of big step in that, Ben, but I do think that conversation is largely that it is just laying off people who already are good at journalism. What I think getting rid of Around the Horn does is that it kind of ensures that there's not going to be a next group of journalists at ESPN who rise to replace anybody, either in-house or to move on. Like, this show was really a breeding ground, a developmental kind of minor league for a lot of the other shows on ESPN and everywhere else, podcasts, whatever you want to look at, that populated some of the most popular stuff that's out there right now. And so that, I think, is kind of going to be the part that stings the most with Around the Horn leaving, is a, Pablo Torre or I don't know, name anybody.
I mean, Bomani Jones.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, they're not going to have anywhere to go anymore to get these really, really valuable reps and give opinions and be good at TV and all the things that this show kind of required you to do with such tiny windows.
Yeah, it really was. And I think that's ultimately going to be its legacy, at least in terms of the back half of it. The last 10 years or so would be that it was an incubator for talent. I mean, it was, to your point, where people would go and they get reps. And I don't know if people like realize how important that is, because it's one thing to do like what you and I are doing right now through a StreamYard screen. And it's another to have that red light come on and know that you're going. I mean, I don't think the show is live. It seemed like it was always taped like an hour beforehand, but to essentially, it seemed like it was taped to be live, at least, to be going live on ESPN.
Live to tape. Yeah.
Yeah. It was live to tape. So I think that to get those reps on ESPN airwaves and to develop chemistry and to develop your voice as a personality, that to me will, I mean, even Skip Bayless, like this was ultimately where Skip Bayless like kind of arose from, other than being, a Dallas Morning News columnist. So it was just interesting to see the evolution, because I do think there was something to that era when it was kind of just a bunch of old, white sports writers grumbling, because that's effectively what it began as. But the way it did evolve into being a breeding ground for talent and an incubator for talent, I think that's ultimately going to be its legacy.
Yeah. And, especially they got really good at finding local people that were like, you look at who's on it right now. Somebody like Courtney Cronin. Mm-hmm. She just worked in Chicago and they kind of plucked her out. She had done some national radio. Or Bill Barnwell, who was like a writer, podcaster, and a dude who would be on SVP at midnight sometimes. Or Clinton Yates, he's only on TV there. That's the only place you'll ever see him on television on ESPN. And there's a lot of people that you could say the same for. So it's going to be, I think, a bigger change at how things go for ESPN and ESPN talent than I think maybe people realize, because that was the pipeline for a lot of people here. Okay. It sounds like the same gentleman, Mr. Eric Rydholm, will be crafting something, cooking something up with ESPN. He's going to continue to run PTI. It sounds like PTI is... I mean, I've always assumed that show will just exist until Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser say it's not going to exist. I mean, you'll have to rip it from their bones at a certain point if you wanted to cancel it. But what should go here? What should be that lead into PTI? What can replace Around the Horn? Where are we looking starting next summer for the replacement?
Yeah, it's interesting because you posed this to me off air, and I really struggled with coming up with anything, because I felt like Around the Horn, it's just so synonymous with PTI. Like those were my afternoons coming home from middle school and high school. Was 5 o'clock, you watch Around the Horn, and then 5:30 you watch PTI. And so it's hard to really
hold on. Do you have a favorite Around the Horn panelist if you actually watched it?
I mean, that's the thing, is like, I haven't watched it on a consistent basis since
so
back
long.
then. Yeah.
So
that's like that's what it seemed like a lot of the like social media posts like about it were like a lot of people like bemoaning it leaving, but also a lot of people who hadn't watched it since 2008. So,
I think I'm the only person who watches that show in America. Maybe it might be just made for me at this point because I am always on Shifted Awful announcing with it on in the background. I may be the only one. I'm not sure.
yeah, I'm trying
With
to
all
think
due
of who,
respect, of course.
yeah, I mean, it's going away. I I'd go with like an OG like Woody Page, I guess, just because I think like that's where that like energy for the show was first kind of harnessed, and I think that's what kind of gave its legs, that chemistry he had with Jay Mariotti and Tim Calishaw and those guys early on. So I guess I'd go Woody Page. What about you?
Yeah, I like the kind of the OGs for sure. Um, Probably I like the more curmudgeonly. So whether it's Woody Page or Bob Ryan or Bill Plaschke, probably one of those three just at least feels like it
Yeah.
epitomized the show the best, which is just cranky columnist with hardly ever a positive take to give. And I know it's not that anymore, but that would probably be my direction as well. But back to our original question. Do you
Yeah.
have an idea? Do you have a memo to send Eric Rydholm for what should replace this?
I mean, just because it is Eric Rydholm and I kind of wanted to stay in the Eric Rydholm universe, my first
Mhm.
thought was just bring back Levitard and bring back highly questionable, but I don't think that's realistic, and I don't think my answer is realistic either. But my answer was bring back High Noon with Pablo Torre and Bomani Jones, maybe adjust it, make it a little less I don't want to say shtick based because I don't think it was shticky, but I do think they were at times trying to go outside the box for the sake of going outside the box. And so maybe just fit it into like a younger version of PTI, which is ultimately what I think it was striving to be. But yeah, I mean, that was my first take, my first thought, because I do think you want something that fits the ethos of PTI without it necessarily being PTI.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? You don't want it to feel so out of place while you're still. I mean, look, the people who watch this show and watch PTI still care about like programming on a cable channel. There's not a lot of us do anymore, but like if you're tuning this into this stuff, you probably care. I didn't go here with my views from the subreddit, but the ESPN subreddit is absolutely filled with just old guys who are mad that anything has ever changed about ESPN since 1998. So that is probably the type of people that would care about this whole lead-in concept. I think the real answer might just be that they put a podcast in this slot. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know if they would do that on real ESPN, but they've already basically filled ESPN2 all day, every day with this kind of content. Um, I just went with another thing from the Ride Home universe, this super producer, and he produced Jesus and Mero on Showtime back before their breakup. I don't think they'll reunite here. I'm not doing the Bomani Pablo reuniting thing like you here, but I will just say something like with one of those two, a little bit more comedic, just a half hour. I don't know if it works in the middle of the day like
Yeah.
that, but whatever. I think that, maybe in the spirit of they're doing a Jason Kelsey late night show, maybe they get a little more creative here. But I think it either has to be super journalistic or super silly, like one or
Right.
the other here, and just kind of see if it sticks.
I mean, what do we? I mean, realistically, like it probably will be a podcast. Like we both, you and I both kind of have pie in the sky ideas. I think like what it will be is going to actually be interesting. Like because I
Yeah.
don't, I think it was really tough to kind of think about like what do you even put there. Like one of my thoughts was like just extend PTI to an hour, and I don't think that's realistic either. So
No,
maybe you
make
bump
those guys
PTI.
work more in their 70s and 80s.
Yeah, so maybe you bump PTI up to 5, and then I don't start Sports Center a half hour early. Like I just don't
Yeah.
know like what you even do there.
Yeah, I am not sure either. If you were to ask me if there's any ESPN talent who deserves their own show right now, or who like feels next, there's just not a lot left. But I would say probably Elle Duncan,
Yeah.
and she hosts that Sports Center, so maybe there's
Right.
something to that. But Who knows? Okay. Jake Fischer is here to talk through his career, big picture NBA media observations, and going independent with Mark Stein at the Stein Line. Let's get to Jake. All right, very excited to be joined today by Jake Fischer, longtime NBA insider, the most recent participant. What do we call you? You're working with Mark Stein at the Stein Line newsletter. I don't participant. I'm off to a bad start. What should we call you, Jake? Contributor?
Contributor works.
Okay.
Yeah, my byline hilariously there is the People's Insider, but contributor applies, so we'll take that.
Very
Is that a pro
well-branded
wrestling reference?
contributor.
I mean, it's been a thing that just came. I think it started honestly. I just wrote this big, like literally right before we signed on here. Stein published. I just wrote like this kind of manifesto, like why I've joined the Stein Line kind of thing. That was a little like artful and poetic, probably to a fault. But yeah, I mean, like I wrote about it in there. I think over the last couple of years, as I kind of shifted into this insider role, I don't know. I don't take myself too seriously. I like posted a picture of, or I did post a picture of me smoking from the stands and the link when the Eagles won the NFC Championship in 2022. The People's Insider thing has been like popping up in my mentions and on Reddit threads and stuff. So I'm just kind of like co-opting it from a branding standpoint now that the nickname was given to me.
Okay, I want to go kind of rewind a little bit, Jake, and just ask you a broad question. We talked last week to kind of announce your move to working with Stein over there and get a new home for your written work. But when you think back through, I mean, you're not any kind of insane veteran here, but you've seen a lot of change over your career. I think it's fair to say. What do you think is the biggest thing that's different from when you started in NBA media through now?
Yeah, I feel like a grizzled veteran, unfortunately.
You've been made to feel that way, maybe. Yeah,
for sure. And like, look, one thing that like I tell students all the time who email me asking for advice, like you can start pretty early. Like I got my start really in the summer of 2013 when I was interning at Slam Magazine. And like to answer your question, like there was no NBA draft Twitter. Like now you got hundreds probably of like amateur draft analysts online putting out video scattering reports and stuff and making their mock drafts. And you can do that in so many different ways, from putting out models from analytical analyses to prospects to just like people ripping through late night Pac-12 tape, But I'm from Philly originally. I was writing for the ESPN True Hoop at the time blog called Philadelphia before Liberty Ballers at SB Nation when I was interning at Slam. And then like Sam Hinkie wasn't advertising the Sixers draft workouts. That was like this whole big clandestine operation he was doing.
Yeah.
And I was writing these profiles for Slam as a freshman in college, like rising sophomore, with second round prospects who would tell me, oh yeah, I'm working out in Philly next week. So I would just call them or their agent like a week later, and I started breaking the Sixers workouts and had some stuff back then. So like I wasn't a full-time reporter, journalist, writer at that stage, but like I was reporting original stuff on that Sixers process from 2013 on. So I think that's like the answer is back then there was so much open road on social media and on the blogosphere that like you could kind of do anything really, and kind of make a name for yourself. Like I remember being surprised listening to you name it podcasts and they'd just like mention Liberty Ballers. And now there's just, I mean, every site has a blog for another blog and a sub blog, and everyone's on 6 different social media platforms. And like, it's kind of, I think just as it's never been easier to like pick a TikTok lane and like hit it and like blow up all across like any type of, do you want to be a digital creator person? I think from like a sports media landscape, like there just was Twitter. There wasn't so much established on there, and anyone could use that as their microphone or megaphone to get some type of noise into the already noise that existed, and you could kind of get a little bit attention and spotlight. So I don't know how you do that now when like people don't know what platform to go on to consume their stuff. So that's a challenge that we're all facing, right?
Yes,
Definitely.
Yes,
That's Jake. I wanted to ask you about your journey because I remember when you were at Sports Illustrated and you were, I believe your official title was producer, but you were doing like written features and well-reported features, but it wasn't necessarily like news nuggets and scoops and some of the stuff you went on to do at Bleacher Report the first time around. I guess, how did like that evolve for you? Did you always like trading the information, or was it just something you found you were good at?
Yeah, to be honest, like my dad would come home from work trips and like give me the week Sports Illustrated that he just bought at the Hudson News when I was a kid, right? And like I'd come down to the kitchen table and there'd be a Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper at my seat that had like a post-it note that said like interesting human interest story, you'd like it. So that's the stuff I wanted to do. Like when I got to SI, I wanted to be, waxing poetic in these profile stories and stuff. And yeah, I was a nighttime desk editor. Like I worked when I first started at SI as like an employee after my internship. Like I interned there the summer for my senior year of college. I got hired to like an aggregation desk role, like unofficially. And then like 2 months later, before I even graduated, the role was like included in other layoffs. So like I got laid off before I even started and just figured out a way to get to New York. And then an editor there called me and said, we've got this nighttime, like editing, social media, all the above, like our evening editorial desk part-time role. I was making like $37,000 a year. But yeah, I was at Sports Illustrated. So I had the full autonomy to like during the day, I would go to shoot arounds and I would email, PR people and get on the phone with agents and start like working on all these stories. And I just said I was with Sports Illustrated. Like no one knew I was a night desk editor. There's definitely some like,
You weren't lying.
yeah, exactly. There's some type of withholding like trickery to it, but like, yeah, I ended up convincing editors to like fly me to LA before the draft. And I went to Lonzo's house and like interviewed LeVar in their kitchen. And like, that was in the magazine. If I remember correctly, like right before the draft, and flew to Toronto right before like Nick Nurse started that season where the Raptors won the title. And that was in the Raptors win the championship Sports Illustrated thing, in print. So I was just talking to all these people and I met everyone through what I have coined as like non-threatening stories. Like I got Starbucks with Mike D'Antoni because I was told he was addicted to Starbucks dating back to his like cappuccino loving days playing and coaching in Italy. And those were the closest, chain thing to his beloved cappuccinos from there. And like over time developed this network. I was working on my book, and when Bleacher Report asked me to do the insider stuff, I was like, that's like a great way to make a lot of trouble and put people's information out that they don't necessarily want out there. But I remember like I called 15 people around the league who I already was kind of talking to, because to find out interesting things like that, like you can't just go into a locker room and say like, hey, Miles Turner, what's your favorite hobby? And he just like tells you I am a Star Wars Lego master. This was like before he posted all about it on Instagram. You have to like talk to people to find out things. So I was hearing the intel-y stuff. Like every trade deadline, I would kind of put out like little things along the way. Or like I remember when Blake Griffin got dealt to Detroit, it was like this big shocking thing, right? The Clippers proposed, we're going to show your jersey in the rafters, re-sign here. And then they traded him like 6 months later. I wrote something, I remember, not to pat myself in the back, like so good on that. People in the Pistons front office got like called in to be like, who told Jake Fischer all this stuff? So I kind of had it in my back pocket a bit, but until I called those 15 people who are not the same 15 people now, like that's still my approach. Like there's people I call every week, There's other people I call like every once in a while. It's always like a sliding scale. Like some people drop out, some people come in. Who's to say? But until I called that initial crop and was like, "Hey, Bleacher Report proposed me on doing this stuff. Can I call you? Can I always say like, can I bother you every week? I always try to like, admit that like this is a little bit of a prying, like pesty kind of a role. Until those people said like, yeah, like call me whenever. That's really what I think gave me like the push to actually do it. Yeah.
So, couple times now you've been tentacles in a few different places, independent, whatever kind of descriptor you want to use. Do you notice that sources, some of the people you're talking about, or even teams, PR staff, those types of people, does it hurt your access to be in this role? Is it any more of a challenge versus having a legacy outlet in your email at yahoo.com or something? Like, have you noticed challenges coming from that?
So I've never emailed anyone from like a professional, like company corporate email. Like I pretty much only have ever done outreach stuff through my Gmail. So that hasn't necessarily been like a tool, but for sure, when you call a PR person or just like anyone you've never met before and say, I mean, before the Sports Illustrated key, I definitely like used that. I milked that as much as I could without a doubt, because it opens a ton of doors. And then, yeah, saying I'm the senior NBA reporter for Yahoo Sports definitely helps with some people as well. I think right now, fortunately, there are most people that like I need to be calling in order to like get information. People know who I am, and at least we have like some type of rapport, or they know someone who knows me type of thing. I think so far the resistance I felt is like, if you want to talk to any PR person, whether they work for a brand that is partnering with a player for some product or an all-star lineup or whatever, a team PR, an agency PR person, and you want to like try to sell them on sitting down, let's like do this story that, I mean, I did this whole thing with Jalen Johnson in February, for example, that was like kind of in conjunction with like the Hawks, and Clutch Sports were like everyone was on board, like sat down with him, talked about how he was dealing with depression at Duke during COVID, and like he got labeled as, like a druggy guy, and that like helped him fall down the first round. And it was this whole like traumatic experience. And like to sit down and get 45 minutes with him, like to do that for Yahoo Sports probably was a better scenario to several people involved than like to go do it now potentially behind a paywalled Substack. But like all those relationships with those particular people, as I just said, like I have those still. Like I worked on the phone with Hawks PR and the Clutch people and Jalen's people, and like if I needed to get him on the phone again, I think that wouldn't be too difficult. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, if I want to go, like there are probably some stories I won't try to pursue now because they're not people I've already established a working rapport with, or but whatever you want to continue to fill the blank with.
Yeah, that makes sense. What has like this offseason been like? When I say offseason, I don't just mean like the NBA offseason. I mean like the sports media offseason, because we've had this kind of bizarre scenario where Woj retires, Shams' contract's up, Chris Haynes' contract's up. You obviously knew your contract was coming up with Yahoo. You get swept up in this like NBA insider free agency that I can't recall anything like it in sports media. What was it like, to just witness it and then to know that you were going to be a part of it? I'm guessing was exciting, but also interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I mean, I think when I got let go at SI and that whole big, this is the end of Sports Illustrated thing in October 2019, I saw my name in print and people around the league were texting me like, I'm sorry, like you're going to be okay. Like I remember Sam Hinkie texted me and said like, you're going to be fine. And that
just get a job teaching at Stanford, Jake.
Exactly. I mean, the amount of people who have made the joke that I should go become the GM of Northeastern men's basketball has been
there you go. Or
a lot of people. But yeah, I think like that moment was the first time I saw myself as like a public entity, which maybe I'm just like naive and dumb for like I wanted to be a sports writer for like my entire life. And I thought, like Howard Eskin was this giant Philadelphia sports media figure, but he's like on radio and TV and like out there. Like I didn't expect to be doing this, what we're doing right now. Like I thought you could just be a scribe and like fly into a place and pen a story and have it go in print and then like you just go on with your life. So the fact that this took on like I mean, I already was feeling it before this summer, like when I go to a wedding of, I'm the plus one and I don't know so many people there, but like someone's coming up to me and saying like, "Hey man, I love your work." That just started to happen more. And then
What's the number one question you get asked in that spot? People want info, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, people want to know what their team's going to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Without
Are we getting so and so?
Yes.
Does our coach actually suck? I mean, it felt like you had a story there. I was trying to set you up for that, but
no. I mean, those interactions are nice, and I try to like, thanks, man. But I'm not trying to like talk intel when I'm like 4 dirty martinis in at a like wedding,
Yeah,
but
fair enough.
Yeah, it's been, I don't know, the amount of attention on all of it was crazy. Like I remember the day that Woj retired, I had like 400 unread text messages just of like all these people, industry or not, just asking me like, are you going to ESPN? So, I mean, I'm hoping, as I knock on wood, maybe you can hear that like all that interest will follow us to markstein.substack.com or whatever. Yeah, markstein.substack. I got to get this ironed out here. And they'll subscribe because like that's the name of the game we're in right now. But I think also there's this weird element right now of sports media where like people want to kind of, I don't know. I don't think there should be this like competition that people like keeping a scoreboard of like who's getting what and whatever. Like that I think is a bit problematic, but I think the fact that people want to know what we're doing and like where we're going is more emblematic of like this 2024 media is on media commenting about media, and like a lot of the buzz is being perpetrated by people in the industry who like want the jobs who are below that, just like in the NBA. Like everyone in the NBA talks about what GM head coach is going to get fired because they want to either be an interview candidate or they want their friend to get that job so they can hire them. Like it's definitely, I think, had more attention on it because of that aspect more than anything else.
So basically, it's our fault. Is that kind of what?
No, I mean there isn't. I mean, look,
it is maybe.
Look, there's enough interest in it that like we're doing this podcast. Like people have been writing about. I mean, I'm grateful for the interest for sure. Yeah, it's like it's I don't know. It's all convoluted. I don't know what the answer is.
To me, I mean, for whatever it's worth, I always think of it as it's just a symptom of how big all this is getting, right? It's like people just care about sports. So sometimes that means they're like really interested in what crazy thing Pat McAfee said. Sometimes they're like, Micah Parsons had a cool sack. And I think that the lines are just kind of breaking down between those things being separate. But to go back to kind of the NBA side of things, Jake, I wrote up a comment that Brian Windhorst had on Thanasis Antetokounmpo's podcast a little while ago, which is not a place I thought I would ever find an article people cared about. But Thanasis asked a great question, and Windy clearly was ready to talk and said that NBA media right now is, quote, not in a great place. He said that they're devaluing things that help build the league up, one of those being storytelling. He said everything's too short. People are focused on tweets, low lights, highlights, things like that. And social media, and not as much on storytelling and really learning about the people. And he calls it chronicling the season, just sort of the blow by blow, the things that really matter over the course of the 82 games. Do you agree with Wendy?
I do. I think it's like a problem on so many levels. like I'm such a football fan, and I obviously follow it with the knowledge that I have as a media sports employee, worker, whatever person. And I mean, I'm not an employee. Never mind, forget that word. But you know what I'm saying? And like, especially when the last 2 years has been talking about the next NBA media deal as this like elastic expression where we didn't know what it was going to look like. And you flash forward, and so far, it just sounds like it's going to be the same thing, just on different places. I think part of it is that there isn't like there isn't a controlled way to tell the story of the season. Like football just has it so well done that like you got your games on, and this is not a novel take that I'm giving, but I'm gonna make it more novel. Like you have your Thursday night, you have your Sundays, Sunday night, Monday night, and like even the storylines reset with the injury updates, you know, the Joel Embiid of it all of late, like would be far more interesting if like there's a standard injury reporting process that like everyone follows and whatnot. But that like if you don't know, like the Suns are getting Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal back, excuse me, for tomorrow night's NBA Cup game against the Lakers. Like that should be great. And like it just isn't for some reason. I think a lot of it is because there is such an emphasis on just here's the news, what's happening with this immediate thing, how can I gamble on it? And then like now the game plays, the Suns don't look like this or the Lakers don't look like that, and everyone just wants to know who they're going to be trading for. So I mean, I'm hoping that we can do this on the Substack where, you know, like last year when Alperen Sengun and the Rockets came to town, like it was so interesting to talk to him about how the whole league knew that the Rockets wanted to sign Brook Lopez 2 summers ago. Like they wanted Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, and Brook Lopez. They got 2 out of the 3. And if they got a clean sweep, maybe Alperen Sengun like doesn't have his breakout year that he was having. And like I talked to him about how he heard the noise and like it helped him, you know, fuel his offseason and stuff like that. Like combining that like intel about sliding door stuff about the offseason, or even, you know, can we spend February through June picking up the pieces of what happened at trade deadline and what didn't happen at the trade deadline, and like what the actual teams are like evaluating their roster based upon that type of stuff. Like I think that's interesting. But I think aside from just like who's winning and losing and like the matchups that happen between the Lakers and the Nuggets on Sunday and like what that can mean if they play each other in the playoffs, it's just hard when there's so many games and you never know when they're going to play and you don't know which nights are cup nights and which nights aren't. And I mean, I think anyone closely observing knows it's Tuesday and Friday, but like, I don't think your average fan really does. So it's a hard problem to solve when the like canvas that you're trying to paint is like not a set thing. Like every like tonight, I don't know how many games there are tonight. Like, you know, there's 1 or 2 NFL games on Monday night. Like there could be 13 or there could be 2. Like it's just hard, I think, to chronicle something that's hard to chronicle.
Definitely. And I would imagine that's part of the appeal of going somewhere like the Substack is you don't have these restrictions. You don't have to work in gambling ads. You don't have to worry about like quotas and things of that nature. You kind of have this canvas now to, you know, tell these stories that you want to tell that don't necessarily fit into like an overarching strategy that's, you know, decided by an algorithm.
Yeah. I mean, there's definite benefit to the same algorithm of like, I will probably write plenty of Lakers because there's plenty of Lakers fans, and same thing with the Knicks and what have you. But yeah, like I think the hope is we just keep making phone calls, especially as things pick up between now and February 6th. And like, maybe we try to co-opt that people aren't. I mean, I know for a fact that for all of Yahoo's Olympics coverage, we talked. There was some meeting I was on right before I parted ways. That the average time someone spent on an article of all of Yahoo's Olympic stuff was like a minute 30. Like it doesn't matter where you're writing it, people are going to be spending short amount of time just because, it's so easy to click. I mean, how many times are you in an elevator? Maybe you guys haven't even noticed this. Maybe you or any listener, I will challenge you. The next time you're in an elevator, which is maybe more frequent if you live in New York City compared to other places, but the next time you're in an elevator, just kind of like mosey your attention around and look at how many people are just aimlessly clicking around their phone from one app to another. Like, it's hard in that world to get people to read. So maybe we blast them with Substack alerts for like just 400 word. I don't need to write a 2,000 word notebook about the whole off-season landscape. Like, we just really pinpoint a couple of things and keep it bite-sized and whatever. I don't know what the plan is going to be, but you're right. Like, the hope is to find just like a wide enough audience that is enough to keep us doing the stuff that we want to do and making it worthwhile, and like not having to chase the things that aren't like actually interesting. Because also, like, I mean, you benefit as a newsbreaker, you benefit from both sides of the, if you can be first on something and have a whole story, a whole news cycle circulate around what you're doing, that's like the prime goal. But also, if one ESPN article comes out on a Monday about a Sixers team meeting, like, you can then, that's a very easy thing to like latch onto and like, here's your take now, here's what you were able to find out. So if we can like get both ends of those ends of the spectrum, that is the hope.
Yeah, and then as you don't need me to tell you, then by the time you publish something, other social media accounts and websites have taken all the nuggets out of it that were relevant in the first place, and I'm sure that poses some unique challenges. But you talked about that like Şengün example and some of the other ones that you've done. I guess the Jalen Johnson piece, probably it seemed a little more orchestrated, but something that I think about, and I actually asked someone this season, because it's been talked about so much, who works kind of behind the scenes with NBA players and more of like the marketing and community outreach kind of player programming space, about why players are so nervous to maybe share themselves. Like, because that's the other side of what Windhorse is talking about, is you can't just will into existence the telling of a player's story. They have to want to do it. And I think that there's a reticence there that maybe wasn't always there. And I asked them why that might be. And what they said is that fear of being turned into a kind of social media punchline has really made players hesitant to kind of be authentic and be out there and never knowing when something is gonna. Yeah, I think of something as petty as like when people were laughing at KD for his ashy calves or whatever, that one viral photo. And he's referenced that since. It genuinely kind of bothered him, and I would probably be bothered too. So have you seen that? How do you think that affects all of this?
Yeah. I mean, look, that's like part of why I have leaned into like making fun of myself when necessary, because like I get it too. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing something for public consumption, like, you are going to get flamed. That's just kind of the reality. And I think in the NBA too, like, since it's competition, you're already presenting yourself. You can get crossed over on any play. You can get dunked on any play. You can, miss a layup like Ben Simmons, and it just gets clipped and goes viral because of the moment he had in Philadelphia. That was his last moment playing in Philadelphia. And he's back playing in Philadelphia. And what does he do? Whiff a layup. Like, that's going to get clipped and sent out and whatever. So like, maybe that's, as I continue to make veiled pitches to people to potentially read our stuff, but also if anyone in the industry is listening, like, maybe that's a way to potentially get players to be more relaxed. It's like, look, like, let's do something together that's silly, but also like has meaning. And we both might look like idiots, but like, we're having fun. So like, who can laugh at us if we're already laughing? Then they're laughing with us, kind of thing. But guys do just, I think they care too much about, because the reality is half the league is not secure in their spot. Like, half the league is going out on the court and their agent is telling them, you're not playing for the Lakers or the Suns or the Timberwolves. You're playing for all 30 teams to potentially want to pay you. and they don't want to look weak in any capacity at all. They want to look like a killer and someone who's professional and put together. And why shouldn't they? There's millions of dollars on the line. Like the way this league works, you could be on a minimum contract 1 year, have a great season like Derrick Jones Jr. and get $30 million. That's like, the stakes are pretty damn high. So I understand that challenge. I think because of that, I think maybe teams, the union, agencies, whatever, maybe we need to be able to impress upon players when like you do make it and you are secure, like tell that story, tell how hard that was. Like I think it's cool how honest and open and authentic Tyrese Halliburton always has been, and like you're starting to see his frustrations now in post-game locker room stuff. I think part of him being able to do that is because he has a $200 million contract and the Pacers like already anointed him, you know, so he can have a rough start to the year because the Pacers are telling him, you're our guy. Like we're not going anywhere. So I don't know. That is a complex challenge.
Yeah, it is. But I Halliburton's a great example of somebody where, you know, he's on Old Man in the Three. He's getting laughed at about the voice stuff. He's on McAfee. He just takes it all in stride. He's not ever kind of been afraid. So, yeah, I think maybe those examples and kind of maybe we all need to pay more attention as I talk back to the people who are sometimes part of that issue on our side of the mics here. But that'll wrap us up, Jake. I appreciate the time and feel free to plug everything one more time. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah. Sorry if I rambled too much, but it's 5 o'clock and I've been rambling all day on a microphone. We're going to be bringing at least 2 writing missives, posts, updates, whatever they're going to be at markstein.substack.com, the Stein Line every week. I mean, I honestly think like I was saying, I think there's going to be less. Like I think there's going to be less words more often. I think there's going to be, it'd be really cool to just always be sending stuff to people's inboxes, you know, because we've got 4 paragraphs and it's worthwhile and it's ready. So I know it's like a weird sales pitch to say, come on board and like see what we do. We don't really know what we're going to do, but like, you know what at least you're going to get. Like, you know, you're at least getting 2 of the top 5 or so NBA insiders, like at least 4 times a week. And we're going to have chat functions for our paid subscribers. So if you want to message with us directly on the app, you can do that. And it's only $50 a year. There's a sale going on right now. And that's the same price it was when it was just Stein. So it's not like a giant lift, I don't think, for anyone. If it is, let me know. But that's the pitch. And we're going to be doing a bunch of video stuff to complement it all on the Bleacher Report app. At least once a week right now. I've done a couple like quick turn hits, and we're going to be increasing that frequency for February during the trade deadline stuff, before the draft, during free agency, all that jazz. So more of the same content, just different places. And I hope to see y'all following along.
Awesome. You heard him. If that price doesn't work, he wants you to reach out directly to him to get that content. And yeah, it's great stuff. They're breaking news all the time. Great conversation here. Check it out. Ben and I will be back right after this to wrap up the show. All right, Ben, a perfect time to debut our news segment called Views from the Subreddit, because the namesake of the segment is obviously it's a tribute, it's a send up to Drake, and he just took another L this week, suing Kendrick Lamar for how badly he lost their beef. So we will give him a little bit to be happy about here with this honor. But the whole idea here is basically have some fun by digging through the most insane or silly or maybe sometimes smart, I don't know where you went with this, observations from the subreddit communities of the biggest personalities, shows, and everything else in this crazy world that we cover. I will let you kick us off because you took a couple that were more down the middle, some of the more big communities on Reddit. I had to get a little creative, so I'll let you start us and I'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say I love subreddits. It's one of those things every time I go on a subreddit, I'm like, I should be spending more time on a subreddit. Maybe I should be an active poster on a subreddit. It's kind of surprising that I'm not. Maybe I am. Who knows? But so I went to the Levitard Reddit. And so what I like about the Reddits is, especially for the podcasts, is like you find a variety, and sometimes it's giving takes in the style of the show. Sometimes it's complaining about the idiosyncrasies of the show. And sometimes it's just observations that, like, I'll go there and I'd be like, thank God I'm not the only person thinking this, because somebody else
It's
is
incredibly
actually
parasocial, over the top. Do these people actually like each other or what?
Right.
It verges on incredibly unhealthy, but also can be hilarious.
Yeah, it's a lot of hate watching and hate listening, but also with love. So here was one of the takes I found from the Dan Levitard subreddit. And then the title just says, everyone on the show looks bundled up like it's snowing outside. So I looked up the Miami weather. It got down to 64 degrees last night in Miami, and Dan looks like he's walked out of an LL Bean catalog, which Dan did. He was like bundled up. I think this was from Monday's episode of the Dan Levitard show with Stu Gatz, but it it was one of those things I thought too. Like, everybody in that studio looks incredibly cold right now. And so it was good to know that I wasn't the only one who thought that.
It's one thing to have enough time to watch the amount of content that show puts out, but then to do some extra homework and research after you've logged out of the episode is done and your day is just continuing, and you're like, this was weird. I mean, how much time does it really take to open the weather app and type in Miami? But then you wrote a post about it. I appreciate that they're programming our show for us, but yeah, this is a perfect example. Go over to the other one that you took.
Okay. Well, this was like a kind of a harsher critique, but it was also kind of funny. It says, Dan is ironically an early 2000s sitcom level of bad boss, wants to be everyone's friend, wants to friend every employee, but they don't respect him or show up, and still makes excuses to why the show keeps dropping in quality.
Yeah, the Levitard subreddit is all hate watching. I mean, if we're being real, it is almost entirely hate watching. And I don't know, I don't even remember when it was. I think it was on the episode of, actually, you know what it was? It was the episode of Pablo Torre finds out that led to our Cold War with Mr. Strauss. They talked about feedback from fans and whatever that you can get on social media. And Dan said that somebody came up to him and gave him a bunch of feedback. And it was nice to have it come from real life instead of just the echo chamber of their subreddit. And I was like, yeah, probably. Because if I worked for a show like this, I would never dare to look at these comments.
Oh, no.
I would be second guessing myself live on YouTube every day. I'd be like, I wouldn't say a word if I looked at one of these comments.
Well, and they reference the subreddit semi-frequently. And that to me was always, it would make me aware of criticism of the show that I wasn't even aware of. I'm like, this is like a fourth dimension of Levitard listening. Like, I can't even commit myself to. So that's probably why I stay away as much as I can.
Okay, I'll take one here.
Yeah.
So this is just more in the unhinged universe of subredditors. From the Pardon My Take subreddit. Is PMT banned in the United Arab Emirates? I'm checking to see if I'm going crazy here or I might have missed something. I'm currently in Dubai and I cannot get PMT to download. All my other podcasts work. Just Pardon My Take will not play. Blah, 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 talking about the platforms that he's tried. And then the top comment below from user Getting Jacked, not exactly a shocking user to see in this community. I distinctly remember being in Abu Dhabi 5 years ago at Christmas and listening to them. But there is a chance that since then, the UAE government realized that such a high proportion of the listeners are sickos and perverts that they had to ban the podcast. I don't know why this was being talked about. I don't know why enough people have expertise of listening to Pardon My Take in the United Arab Emirates, Ben, that there was a genuine conversation here. But there was like 15, 20 comments about this.
Well, and it seems like they were all running into the same issue. So it sounds like there might be something to this. We might have stumbled upon a story here.
There was another person who said, well, I split time between Texas and Dubai. There's probably a blocker for all Barstool content. Like, it was just the most serious conversation about watching this American sports podcast that is pretty ridiculous from the Middle East and the various challenges that come from it. In that vein, geopolitics, everybody's favorite topic here. The the Joe Rogan podcast. We did not write about this, but he got into it with Vladimir Klitschko, whose brother is the mayor of the capital of the Ukraine. And I just liked this idea from a user called Ocean Raccoon. He said it would be so funny if Klitschko went on a U.S. tour to demolish the manosphere and show them up for the pathetic, ignorant, coward fascists they are, whatever. Capped off by beating Jake Paul unconscious. These are the types of conversations that are going on in the Joe Rogan is also a lot of hate watching. If you think that all Joe Rogan listeners just are like brainwashed by whatever he talks about, no, it is not like that. They're all pushing back on him constantly. So there's my.
Well, I was gonna say, like, you would think like the Pat McAfee subreddit hates us, and they probably do, but a lot of their criticism of the show like mirrors our criticism of the show. Like, I think we wrote a story, roughly a year ago that they were all sick of the Aaron Rodgers appearances on the show. So it's one of those things like, yeah, you're definitely going to get some unhinged posts on subreddits, but a lot of times, like if you have personal criticisms of the show, you'll probably find somebody who agrees with you. I'm going to sneak in a Bill Simmons one here just because I think the Bill Simmons subreddit is probably the most fruitful. I would say they seem to be the most in tune with Bill.
It's the funniest.
It's definitely the funniest. I think the funniest is how much they've made Russillo a character on there. Like if you were to go to it, you would think it was the Ryan Russillo subreddit at times.
Yeah.
And just the way they've been able to craft his rants. And then like there was, I think we tweeted out actually the screenshot of Doug Gottlieb's day when he hosts his podcast and his radio show. And then he goes and coaches basketball. And somebody just posted the screenshot with the caption, "Sounds like Russillo's ideal day." Like I thought that was great. But
just grinding tape. Yeah, they basically, if you only consume, like if you were a Bill Simmons podcast listener and you actually never listened to Russillo's show, you would think he is the most like degenerate, antisocial like creep. They do him really dirty. And if people may have their various opinions about how far off that might be. I'm not going to weigh in there, but you can check out the subreddit and get a very outsized idea of all of that from Ryan. It's definitely good.
Well, here was a post on the Simmons subreddit though about Bill, and this was about Monday's Guess the Lines episode with Cousin Sal, and the title is "No doubt the old man still has the fastball," and it reads, "Who else can rip Jason Garrett for comparing Tua to Magic Johnson? Not that bad, in my opinion. While literally minutes earlier comparing the Washington loss to parlays to what John Wayne Gacy did to actual humans in detail." Like. And that was one of those things where I listened to the episode and it didn't even cross my mind how crazy Simmons, John Wayne Gacy comparison was. And there were like 4 posts about it on the subreddit.
That's what's beautiful about the Simmons one is that he has so much content over the years that anyone who is a deep enough Simmons head to actually engage with this Reddit can fully just post in Simmonsisms.
Oh yeah.
Everything,
it's like speaking Carmi.
The comment section is the most hilarious part because it'll just be the whatever piece or this and that. Like people just will use his little like crutches, his little speaking unique comments and stuff. And it's if someone were to look at it that had never listened to an episode, similar to what I was just saying with Russillo, they would correctly think that everybody in there is a gigantic freak, and I count myself among the freaks. I've been part of that Reddit since before I worked here, Ben. So I can't hide from anything here.
Yeah, I mean, I speak Simmons, so you listen to Bill long enough, you're going to speak Simmons. So should we land the plane with that one?
Yeah, maybe that'll be our last our next recurring segment. Is we just speak to each other in Simmonsisms and really make everybody never tune back in. Okay, let's close out with our hot mics. We each bring something to the table that caught our attention, made us excited, made us mad, whatever the case may be from the week of sports media. I'll breeze through this one pretty quick, Ben, but I think it's been too long since we talked about Tom Brady. And there was a report today from John Oran that Fox executives brought maybe the most obvious tip to Mr. Brady, which is to talk more about what exactly is going on in the football game from an X's and O's standpoint. And you combine that with something that I wrote, which is that the average margin of victory in the games that Brady has called has been 14.4.
Yeah.
Just blowout after blowout. There have been some close games, like I saw in the comments of our post of that article, that people were like, oh, he got Bears, Packers the other week, and there have been some decent games, but mostly a lot of bad ones. Even the close games, it's been like 10 points, 7 points, whatever, not exactly down to the wire every time. And the fact that he's still just not cutting it. And I think it's just fair. I watched another full game of his this week, which is kind of why my attention is on him. I hadn't watched a full Brady game in a bit. I think I'm coming around to the idea that he might have gotten a little bit of a bad shake this season with some of the games. And it's like, okay, talk more about X's and O's, but the games suck. Like, I can kind of see, if I'm really being fair, why it may have not been a perfect first season, but you could say the same thing about anybody. And in sum, I think that Fox continues to have an issue. We kept saying, oh, well, they have the Super Bowl. He just needs to get good by then. It's about to be week 13. Super Bowl is in 2.5 months. Is he really going to, it's already been 2.5 months. Is he really going to get that much better by now? I think this is just what it is. And they can give him all the tips, or we can make excuses all we want, but the reality is just not good enough still.
Yeah, he started with that Browns-Cowboys game that was over like 5 minutes in, and it kind of seemed like that just set the tone for his season. But that's broadcasting. Like, you're going to have some stinkers, and yeah, he might have more stinkers than not at this point. But I think if you're Fox, the concern would be like, he's not getting the reps in these tight games when he's gonna call one or two of them in the playoffs at least. Like, he's gonna get good games in the playoffs, you would think. Maybe he won't, but it seems like every Super Bowl that's been played in the last 5 years has gone to overtime or close to it. So I would think that, like, that's the concern. To bring this back to Simmons and Cousin Sal, they brought a good point. He's going to be on the call on Thursday for Cowboys Giants, right? He's going to be on the call for Tommy DeVito versus Cooper Rush, and maybe that's what breaks him.
Fox has a Saturday game on maybe Christmas week, one where there's just games every freaking day, and I don't have no idea who's going to call what, but they have Steelers-Ravens.
Yeah.
They got to put him on a Saturday game and try to just give him the reps of at least a game with stakes, even if it's not going to be, you can't predict if it's going to be a great game. You can't predict if it's going to be close. But that was, as I dug through the future schedule to try to save the season and give him some of that, that was the only one I could really find. There's another one, I think, involving the Eagles and Steelers that looks like he'll probably call it. That could be a nice game, but it's not exactly, it's two Pennsylvania teams, but they're not even in the same conference. They're not either one some kind of dominant Super Bowl favorite or anything. So I don't know. It's a tough spot. But what is your hot mic to close us out here?
Yeah, my hot mic is a little more obscure. This happened in a Twitter Spaces, or X Spaces, I guess they're called now, with college basketball announcer John Fanta. And this got posted by the Mark Titus Show. They clipped it out, but somebody was giving John Fanta a hard time about where he ranked Cincinnati as opposed to Xavier, or vice versa, and I think accusing him of having bias towards Xavier and Sean Miller. And John just lit into this guy. And if you've ever been to Northeast Ohio and you watch Sports Time Ohio, we had this long running show, Bruce Drennan, where it was basically came on after Guardians and Indians games, where it's just this longtime radio host talking into a camera, like just straight into the camera and ranting to callers. And John's from Cleveland. I know John has watched Bruce Drennan before, and there was a lot of Bruce Drennan in this rant, but I just got to pull out his closing line here. He said, I don't lose sleep over who I rank where. He said, I lose sleep over whether I took the trash out on time, whether I got the groceries for my wife, and the Cleveland Browns. That's what John Fanta loses sleep over.
And then he punctuated it with, you don't get to end the call the way you want to, or whatever. Had to get the last word in there. Yeah, Cleveland. I hear you. I'm sure that was the inspiration. It feels like he was born for further East Coast local radio. I mean, that was really the energy that I was getting. He was born like 30 years too late and should be like on WFAN. Is really the kind of that was what I was getting from it. But either way, the versatility of a sideline reporter, play-by-play guy being able to tap in that way. I mean, there's no limit on the future for Mr. Fanta. He's on to bigger and better if he can pull this out.
Oh yeah, he's going to run the sports world one day. I have no doubt about it.
College football or college basketball should just turn itself over to him. Okay, that'll wrap us up. We're here for you every Wednesday. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to read awfulannouncing.com. We're breaking this stuff down minute by minute all week long. We're also across every social media platform at Awful Announcing, and we'll see you next week.